our palette today, we will be using titanium white, flake white, burnt umber, alizarin permanent, cadmium red, medium yellow ochre, sap green, ultramarine blue, and ivory black. And for our medium, we will be using Liquin original, and for our cleaner, we'll be using just regular old mineral spirits. And I'm going to start off by oiling out a section of the painting. I'm going to oil out only the area in the painting that I'm going to work on at that time. So I just basically applied the Liquin original using a clean brush onto the area of the painting that I'm going to be working on. And today's video is going to be all about the power of observation. So we're going to be applying the second color pass onto this painting, working from life. So remember, I run a Tuesday morning group in Howard County, Maryland. So if you are interested in joining my painting group, you can always go ahead in the description box below, and I will have that information typed up. So today's video is going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to try to recreate the experience of working from life for you. So here you have our model Steve, and now you're seeing the painting. This is going to be the setup that you're going to see, and that is because I'm going to try to mimic the experience of painting from life with this video. I'm really going to try to take the painting from life experience one step further for all of you. I'm really trying to bring the experience for you. So let's get started with explaining the color mixtures that we're going to put on the palette. So the first little area of color is a very simple combination of the burnt umber, alizarin permanent, ultramarine blue. Now we're kind of going all around the colors, but what we want is kind of a dark, warm tone. So again, we're going to be building a value scale of flesh tone, value scale of basic flesh tone on the palette, simply because, to be honest, I would just feel lost if I didn't have a value scale on my palette. It's just really gotten to that point now. It's just automatic. Automatically, I create the value scale. And of course, what I am doing is I'm blurring my eyes at the model. When I blur my eyes, I see very clear, simple areas of color. So right now we're in the middle tones, and we're just using the flake white and more of the reds. So white and red, of course, will give you a pink, and then we're neutralizing that with the yellow. So what I'm noticing is that the flesh tones still need to get a little bit warmer. So again, today is the second color pass for the face, and for the hand. We won't finish the hand, of course, but for the face, we'll be mostly finished. So what we're going to look for are the lights. So we're going to be observing the model from nature, taking a glimpse, and then recreating what we're seeing onto our painting. So that's pretty much the value scale. So in the lighter region, it's going to be, of course, a little bit more yellowish. In the middle tone region, it's going to be closer to the pinkish. And then it starts to dissipate in terms of the chroma. So we're going to be taking a look at the hue changes, and in particular, the temperature changes within each areas of the hues. So between the areas of the color. So today is really going to be about color. We have already answered the question of value and structure, and we've answered the question of local color, and basically our most basic colors have already been answered. Now is the time to really focus on color. But of course, we need to have some type of understanding of our value range, so that's why I'm creating this value scale on the palette. So those of you that are new to this channel and want to know exactly what materials I'm using, you can always go ahead and scroll down to the description box, and all of that information will be typed up for you. So in the middle tone range, just using a little bit of the complementary color, so the cadmium red and the sap green, with of course a little more of the ultramarine blue, just to calm down the heat of these mixtures. And very, very quickly, we're going to start to get the basic flesh tone colors that we need, but we're going to be taking from this flesh tone mixture, and we're going to be tweaking the colors a little bit. So let's get a different brush. So I'm getting a different brush right now. So what I usually do is I charge the palette with one brush, and I get another brush or another two brushes, and I just use those brushes to apply the mixture. So right now, using a little bit of our medium, the Liquin original, with the yellow ochre, I'm going to be observing the light on the forehead first. I'm really going to try to key the lights based on the hue. First, we keyed the lights based on the value that was last time. Now we're going to key the lights based on the hue. So now what we're doing is we're changing the hue and the temperature of the area of light on the forehead. And of course, now you're noticing that where's the photo reference that you keep to the top left corner of your screen? Don't worry, it's not going to go away forever. But for this video, you're going to be seeing this right here. So you're going to be seeing Steve. You're going to be seeing the actual model. You're going to be seeing him in little segments, so in little time segments. So when you work from life, those of you that have worked from life know this, you don't have a photo reference to the top left corner of your vision. You don't have an automatic top left corner of the screen view of the model while you're painting. You just don't. You're painting and you're bouncing your eye back and forth from the model and the painting. That's what we're going to do today. It was a bit of a challenge in terms of editing, but I really want to bring that experience to you. So now what you just saw was a warmer flesh tone gradation. Now on the palette, all we did was add a little bit of Alizarin permanent cadmium red medium. Now we're going to observe the model again. We're going to key another area of light. So just take a look at the model very quickly. Now switching back to the palette, we're going to be using Flake white, and we're going to be working on a different area of color. So we're going to go with a little bit of a more yellowish color. So we're going to mix the yellow ochre, titanium white, and we're going to tint it with a little more of the, we've tinted it with a little more of the cadmium red. So this is the color, the little color patch that we're going to be using for a different area, and we're going to be relating each area of color now to one another. So remember, we're going to be bouncing our eyes back and forth from the model. So now the area that we're going to paint in is going to be the highlight for the forehead. And I know it might take some getting used to. And trust me, this is going to be just for now. I'm just trying this out. So you don't see the photo reference to the top left corner of your screen, because when I was painting this, I didn't see a photo reference to the top left corner of my screen. In fact, I was pretty far away from the model at this point. So I did have to keep moving my eyes back and forth in order to gauge each individual shape. And you know, when you're further away from the model, now look at the model. So we're going to look at a glance. What we see at a glance is what we're going to paint. This is the power of observation. So now we're going to go back to the middle tone range of the palette using cadmium red, and we're going to add a little more consistency now to the paint with the Flake white and a tiny bit of alizarin permanent. So now you can see we're going to go even more pinkish in terms of the hue. So let's return back to the painting and put down the information that we were observing. So now the information we were observing, now we're relating another area of color. And notice how I'm going from the light values. So the cheekbone, the zygomatic bone, as we were observing from the model, is a little bit more red. It's a little bit more pinkish, but it's kind of a deep, kind of earthy pinkish. It's not an industrial, bright, saturated pink. It's not. It's a very, very subtle color. And the way we're obtaining these color shifts, the way that we are tweaking the color is by allowing the color underneath to show through, but tweaking the color ever so slightly with that color that we mixed, which was the alizarin permanent. Now let's go back to the model. Let's take a look at the model for a second, remembering what we're looking at. And now we're going to go back to the palette, and we're going to mix up a little bit of titanium white. So we want to raise the value a little bit and now cool it down. So now we're going to shift a little bit in temperature. So we're going to be using the sap green now. So the sap green is going to give us a much cooler and lighter flesh tone. So we're going to be comparing an area that's a little bit more cooler in temperature. Very simple. Just the flesh tones that we already had on the palette, and we tweaked it with the titanium white, and the sap green. Returning to the painting now, so we're going to be putting that temperature change on the nasal bone. Now these colors are impossible, if I mean they're not impossible, but very difficult to observe in a photo reference. And my camera is fairly average quality, but you just don't really see that kind of color in the photo reference. So that's why I'm showing you only little segments of the model. And you know, another thing, you kind of actually can relate to the challenging task that it is to model. You'll see Steve in real time sitting there in front of us, which I think is really, really cool. But anyway, getting off topic. So that cool color, I'm now putting it down across the corner of the side of the nasal bone. So here we're observing Steve, back to the palate. So this is how we're working. This again, this is the power of observation, bouncing our eye back and forth. So now we're going to be going back to the middle tone region of the palate, and now we want the temperature to get a little bit warmer, a little closer to like a neutral, earthy red. Neutral, earthy red. And the brush does still have a little bit of the sap green. So again, this is kind of a play on temperature because it is green and it is red at the same time. So basically we're putting on the reddish color on top of the greenish, and it's very hard to see on the on your screen. It's very difficult to see, but the nose was a little bit cooler in temperature before. Now I'm going to use a little bit of a scattered color, which is that reddish color, but I'm letting the greenish show underneath so that we're building up the consistency. Now, returning to our model, we're going to observe him once again, taking a good look. Now we're going to go back to a little more of a close-up image. And so we're actually going to be building a little bit more of a kind of a warmish tone. And we're using a little bit of a scattered color technique. So we're scattering opaque color on top of the layer of color that was existing underneath. So and by doing this, we're also going to raise the temperature a little bit. So we want the coolish tones to show underneath, but we also want to put in the warmer areas to contrast. So again, it's a little bit of alizarin permanent cadmium red medium, but this is, in fact, I would consider this a very advanced flesh tone at this point, because now we're building on top of the flesh tone that we had underneath. So the flesh tone that we had underneath was a little less chromatic and it was a little less bright. So what we're doing is we're adding a little more of a chromatic and a little bit of a brighter pink, but we're going to be letting the color underneath show. Thus, we're getting a very, very specific color that we would not be able to achieve if we were painting wet on wet. So let's go ahead and stand back for a little bit. So now you're really seeing how I move back and forth. Let's go ahead and clean off the brush now. So once in a while, maybe every 20 minutes or so, I will clean off the brush, and that's how I do it. Returning back to Steve, we're going to take a good look at his hand. Returning to the painting, now we're at close-up view of his hand. So what's happening here is that I'm really trying to show you that when you're working from life, the model is going to be at a distance from you. You're not going to have the close-up image that you're seeing on the corner of the top left of your screen that you usually see with my videos and many other videos. The reality of it is what I'm trying to present to you in this video. You're seeing the model for a tiny little window, and then you're going back and forth between the model and the painting. But of course, when you're actually working from life, you're going to bounce your eye back and forth much more rapidly than I'm showing you here in the painting. But don't worry, you have me to guide you uh, in terms of what I'm actually putting onto the painting. So what we're doing is we're keying the lights for the hand now. So what do I mean by keying the lights? Observe Steve's hand for a second, just at a glimpse. The color is pretty flat, isn't it? It isn't in nature. I promise you. In nature, it looks completely different. It's not as flattened out. And again, I'm really trying to show you, uh, I'm not trying to say that it's bad to work from photo references. I'm just trying to show you what you can get from a photo reference and what you can get from life. So from a photo reference, you can really get a good understanding of proportion and likeness. Otherwise, photographs wouldn't resemble the people that you photograph. Now, that being said, there is a little bit of distortion in photographic images. Now, here's where the power of observation kicks in. You now have both the combination of the photo reference and the model. That is a great advantage to have. So what we're doing is we're adjusting the temperature of the colors on the hand. So we keyed the knuckles a little more pink, and the back side of the pinky, we're keying it a little more of a neutral, coolish flesh tone. So basically what I'm saying is from the photo reference, it's kind of almost impossible to get lifelike color. Now you're seeing Steve again. Again, this is a this is a real-time image of Steve. Now returning back to the painting, you'll see now that the uh, the color of the hand was rather flat. Now that could also be because of the settings on the camera, don't get me wrong. There are ways of getting better photographs of Steve's hand and of Steve in general. Now, just because you can get a better photograph of the hand doesn't mean that the photograph will give you the lifelike colors that you're observing from nature. Again, the power of observation is what you're observing right now. We're keying the light on the finger a little bit of a earthy red that kind of resembles the veins, kind of the blood flow across the fingers, and a lot of nuance to that little red that you don't see in the photograph. Now, again, returning to Steve, and again, this is real time. Back to the painting, we're going to be observing again an area of color, and we're going to be relating that area. In this case, it's a little bit of the metacarpal, so the index finger. We're just adjusting the temperature a little bit, so that shape now is a little bit greenish. And again, I can't really show you my palette mixtures every time. So again, just you're going to have to trust me on this. So I'm using a little bit more sap green into that area just to contrast the temperature on each individual color section. Now, another thing I want to talk about is, I think I've already mentioned this, when you're working from life, you're really not going to be up front and close with the model. You're really going to be seeing the model at a distance, very similar to what you'll be seeing right now. So right now, you're going to be seeing Steve again at a distance. You're going to remember what you just saw, and then you're going to apply the information from your observation. Again, this is really the power of observation. Now, I know it isn't fair because I can't show you what it actually looks like to observe from my eyes. I wish I could. I wish I could have some really high-tech camera right there for my eyes to bounce it back to you. But in any case, we're really working by keying each individual hue. Notice that the value isn't really changing much at all. I'm just changing basically the relative hue from one shape to another, and also thinking about temperature. But then again, at this point, I'm really focused on colors, really focused on the hues. But temperature does play a little bit of a role, knowing that we have a little more heat in areas that have increased blood flow. I'm not going to name which areas because I'm not an anatomist, but I think the knuckles have a little bit more blood flow. But again, don't quote me on that. I'm not an anatomist. Returning back to the image of Steve, we're going to again observe the hands, in particular the pinky. So we're observing the pinky, and we're going to return back to the painting. So returning back to the painting, we're going to again put in a little bit of a darker value there for the pinky. The pinky is going to be turning away from the light a little bit more around that area. And then this plane change here is going to get even more subtle. So we're just softening that plane change on the side of the pinky. And really, the power of observation can be developed. You can be trained. You can train yourself to strengthen your observation skills. So again, let's go ahead and return to the model. And I'm kind of making the screen go a little bit dark to resemble blinking. So I'm blinking now, and now I'm returning back to the hand. So that's kind of why I put in that little transition. Hopefully it's not too bad putting in that that darker transition. You'll see what I mean when I get to it. So again, we're just softening this little edge around the little pad of the side of the hand, really trying to make it cooler. I'm really trying to push this a little bit cooler. And again, that's with sap green. So here's what I mean about blinking. So this is going to look like I'm blinking. So now I'm blinking, opening my eyes. Now you're observing Steve. So now I'm really trying to get you to observe through my eyes. So I'm going to blink again, blinking, returning back to here. So returning back to the palette now. I'm going to mix up a value scale that's a little more gray, a little less, with a little less heat. And this value scale is going to be used for the beard. So using the flake white and then the titanium white and the burnt umber. So again, we're only going to work on a slight portion of the beard and the hair. In particular, we're going to be working on the area. We're going to be working on the area to the left of the ear. So that pretty much does it for that value scale. So let's add a little more of the medium. Again, our painting medium is Liquin Original, and I actually forgot to bring mine. So if you're watching this, thanks, Cheryl. I really needed that Liquin Original. And for those of you that are watching that are new to oil painting, I prefer Liquin Original now over the Liquin Light. Liquin Light is another one that I had that I didn't really like, but anyway, getting off topic. So that was a basic gray scale using a little bit of ultramarine blue and ivory black. Now the warmer scale and the cooler scale are going to be used in contrast to one another using two different brushes. So I'm going to have one brush that I'm going to designate for the lighter areas of these color scales, and then another one designated for the darker. And I'm basically going to be switching back and forth between them just to kind of work a little bit faster. So a little more alizarin permanent for the warmer scale. I really want it to be a little bit hotter. And now we're going to have one unified dark shape, and that dark shape will kind of connect both of these scales. So the value scales, that is. So returning to the painting. So we're painting the darker value for the backside of the ear. And again, I know it's kind of different not having the photo reference, but another thing that I should talk about in terms of the power of observation, excuse me, is that you're really training yourself to observe from nature, but at the same time, you're also training yourself to observe your own painting. So what I mean is, imagine if we didn't even have the model there in front of us. Now that really will test our interpretation skills as well as our visual memory. So that's another thing to think about when you're painting. And when I was painting this, actually, I had the camera right in front of the painting, so I actually couldn't really see Steve that well. I would continuously move back and forth, just like you're seeing now, observing as much as I can, taking as much information in as I can, and then returning back to the painting. And that's going to bring me to another thing to talk about in terms of working from life. Now, when you're working from life, the pose is always going to have a little bit of variation. There's always going to be something different, and that's where I'm going to tell you something that one of my favorite teachers ever, an artist by the name John DeMartin, would tell me. And he would tell me, don't chase the pose. Don't chase the pose. And what that means is put something down, stick with it, and leave it there if you're confident enough with it. So that is, with this sitting, things were a little bit different in the pose, as they should be, because Steve is a live model. our model is a real person, and real people move. Real people blink, sneeze. You know, they don't stay as still as a photograph. So it's important to know how to take in visual information but not copy it. So what we're looking at is a little bit of light, a little bit of reflected light on the backside of the hair. There are windows in this studio, so there's a little bit of the daylight showing through, a little bit of bluish tone on the back of Steve's hair. And that bluish tone is also influencing the drapery, the shadow color of the white of the drapery. So again, it's all about strengthening the power of your observation. Returning back to Steve, now notice that the shape for the hair isn't quite in the same place, but we didn't need it to be. We didn't need to copy it down. We're really just looking at the color. And this is going to be really, really useful when you're working from life. When you have your foundation laid out, you don't have to change anything anymore. You're just taking in, for example, I only took in the color that I was observing at the back side of the hair, not the shape of the hair, but the color of the hair. And again, not the value of the hair, because we already have that, but the color. And again, the way that we're tweaking the color, the way that we're adjusting the color is by applying a much more transparent layer of color. And again, with each video, I'm trying to bring the experience of creating these paintings closer to you. So again, I'm really trying something very different with the filming style with this painting. So with the filming style and with the editing style. So now you're seeing me kind of like you're looking over my shoulder, basically. And of course, if you haven't noticed, I am working in voice-over style simply because I couldn't talk while painting with my portrait group. It just wouldn't be fair for them to have to listen to me talking the entire time while they're trying to work. It just wouldn't be fair. So anyway, I'm trying to give you the real experience. So it's really like you're there with me looking over my shoulder as I'm putting down these edges. So what I'm doing is just softening the edges around the side of the beard, and you're going to see how I actually stand back quite a bit. Notice how my arm is still pretty much at an arm's length away from the painting. I really don't like to be super close to the painting. Now, as I'm standing back at this point in time, I'm actually noticing that I'm going to change something quite drastically. Yep, we're going to be adjusting the corner of the little still life object that is hanging from our model's mouth. So we're going to be adjusting this still life element basically by moving the corner of it. So if you notice that the corner of the still life element was a little too far to the left, so I originally drew it a little bit wrong. So I'm going to move it to the right, and you're going to notice how quickly we can make these adjustments. So again, this is really going to be the beauty of painting. Check this out. Yep, single brush stroke basically is all we needed to move that. Isn't that wild? It's so easy to move certain things around in the painting. It's really a lot of fun to be able to have complete control over the painting. It really is kind of like your own world, basically. As long as you take in the visual information, interpret it, and you apply your knowledge of color, value, shape, value, color, perspective, structure, it's really not that difficult. And I think that the place where I moved that still life element, some of it was still showing through at this point, but it actually functioned like a shadow, which was kind of neat. So returning back to Steve, we're going to observe him one last time, and we're going to go back to the palette, and we're going to look at the palette and take in a very kind of a warmish a warmish dark red. So we're going to switch to a little more of the darker values from this area. And how about we apply just a little bit of a darkish red tone to the this little corner of the still life element. And these are going to be just about the last adjustments that I'm going to make onto this painting for today. So that being said, I really hope that this video helps you out. I'm really trying to bring a different kind of experience to you. I'm trying to bring you the experience of what it's actually like to work from life, what it's actually like to not have the photo reference to the top left corner of your screen. And again, honestly, I connect a little bit more with the painting when I'm working from life than I do working from photo reference. Again, that's really just my preference. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll be back again in another 24 hours.